Hey, welcome to How to Play, brought to you by Good Games and the Games Capital. Today we're looking at the game Wingspan, a game all about birds. The idea of the game is you're going to be collecting various species of birds and placing them on various habitats on your player board. So it's a set collecting, engine building type game. Once you've got the birds on the board, they're going to score points for doing various things. They'll lay eggs. They'll hunt other mammals and birds, and all sorts of things are going to happen during the course of the game. You'll score points based on different conditions each game, so there's a bit of variety in how the game is going to play out. Before we get into how it works though, let's have a look at what's in the box. Alright, so the components for Wingspan are great. Good quality stuff. We've got a player map for each player, nice thick cardboard, so everyone will get one of those they'll place in front of them. More on how that works in a moment. There are bird cards. There's 170 different birds in this game, so you've got a heap of options or a heap of variety as far as that's concerned. It's got this nice little storage container which also doubles as a display during the course of the game as well. You can have 3 birds on display. There's also a deck of bonus cards, so you'll score extra points for completing objectives in that deck. The coolest thing in this game is the bird feeder, which effectively is a dice tower. So there are 5 dice which have the different food that the birds are going to eat. And at the start of the game, you're going to roll those in the bird feeder, and during the course of the game, you'll roll those occasionally. That will display what food is available for that particular turn, so that's pretty cool. Then we've got these little tokens which represent the different foods, so as you take food you'll take these tokens and keep them in your display and use them as you need to. There are also these eggs in various colours. The colours don't have any importance, just to make things look pretty, so all of those eggs are effectively the same. You're going to take those as birds lay eggs. There is also a round marker, which is double-sided. There's actually 2 different ways that you can play the game. There is a less competitive version and a little bit more of a cutthroat version of the game. Either way, you're going to be placing tiles on these from a selection of, I don't know, there's a dozen or so, maybe 8. You'll choose 4 of those each round, and that will determine some of the victory points that you're going to get for certain achievements on or during the game. Alright, so they're the components for Wingspan. Let's have a look at how it works. So the aim of Wingspan, as with most games, is to score the most points. There's a number of ways that you can score points. The birds themselves, as you play them, will earn you points, or points at the end of the game. They'll each have a different value. You will score points for the different round goals that might come into play during the game. There'll be 4 of those, 1 for each round, and they will vary. And the things that they might require you to do, you might score points for birds in a particular habitat, or it might be birds with a particular type of nest that have eggs on them, and there's all these different combinations. Each game will be slightly different, so you'll score points for those. You will also score points for eggs, so any birds that have eggs left on them at the end of the game will score you 1 point each. Some birds store food, so during the course of the game some of these food tokens will end up on various birds and you'll score points for that. And some birds hunt other birds, and that's represented by tucking cards underneath birds on your board. So for any tucked cards, you're going to score points as well. So they're the different ways that you're going to score points. Oh, and also these bonus cards. So at the start of the game, each player will receive 2 of these bonus cards, and you get to keep one of them and discard the other. And if you achieve what's on the card, then you're going to get bonus points at the end of the game. There is ways to get more of those during the game as well. The game itself is played over 4 rounds, and each round you're going to be taking actions with these cubes, which I failed to show you in the what's in the box section, but each player gets 8 of these cubes which represent the actions that they can take. So you'll place a cube out onto your board, take an action. The actions there are 4 to choose from. You can either play a bird from your hand, so you'll have a hand of cards. You can gain food from the bird feeder. You can lay eggs, and you can draw more bird cards into your hand from either the face-up ones or the ones that are in the piles. So they're the 4 types of actions. Now the last 3 that I mentioned, gaining food, laying eggs and drawing bird cards, effectively work the same way, and we'll show you how that works in a moment. The first action, which is play a bird, is a little different, but let's go through the 4 different actions that you can choose during the game. Alright, so at the start of the game, each player is going to be given 5 of these bird cards, and also you're going to be given 1 each of the 5 different food tokens. You'll look at your bird cards and you have to decide then which of those you're going to keep for the game. You can keep all of them, or you can keep none of them. Each bird card that you keep costs you 1 food token, and it can be any food token, doesn't matter what's printed on the birds, but each card that you keep costs you 1. So if you keep 3 cards, then it's going to cost you 3 of those food tokens. So depending on what is on your bird cards, which birds you get, that may determine how many you keep. And also depending on your bonus cards, you may decide to keep them because they match with what you're trying to achieve during the game. Now let's have a closer look at the bird cards, because there are 3 different types of cards. There are cards or birds that have either no power or a when played power. So this particular bird has an action or a power that activates as soon as you play that bird. You'll get some bonus for doing that. There are birds that have brown powers, this little brown strip here. They only get activated when you take the action for the habitat that the bird is placed in. And then finally, we have birds that have pink powers. These powers activate once between turns. So after you've finished your turn and before it gets back around to your next turn, you may activate this power once, providing a specific requirement is reached during or in between those turns. So they're the 3 types of powers that you're going to see on birds. As well as that, each bird has a few other markings that are important. So in the top corner here, it shows the habitat that the bird can live in. So some birds can only live in 1 habitat, whereas others may be able to live in more than 1. So that will determine where you can place the bird on your board. As well as that, the bird has a feeding cost in these tokens that you're going to collect. So it'll have 1 or more tokens or symbols shown there which represent the different food. So in order to play the bird, you need to be able to pay the food. The bird also has a point value, a little feather symbol next to the point. So at the end of the game, that bird's going to be worth that many points. It also has a nest type, and that could be important for scoring bonus points or end of round goals. And also it will show you how many eggs that particular nest can hold. And so that's fairly important. Can't have more eggs than what is shown on that particular bird. So they're the different things that are important on the bird cards. So the first action that you can perform, or that we're going to talk about, is the play a bird action. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one of these cubes, which I didn't mention at the outset, but each player gets 8 of those cubes, which represents the different actions they're going to take during the course of a round. So to play a bird, the play a bird action is along the top of your board, and you're going to take one of these cubes and you're going to place it in the column or above the column where you're going to play your bird. So at the start of the game, the birds have to be placed from left to right on the board. So at the start of the game, you're going to be placing it in that first column. And then from your hand, you'll choose a bird, pay its food cost, and place that bird into the appropriate habitat, depending on what it says on the card. Now, during the course of the game, you're going to be playing more and more birds, and as you move across these columns, you'll notice that there are egg symbols. So as you get more birds in play, there's also going to be an additional cost of eggs as you place them. So in columns 2 and 3, It's going to cost you 1 egg to play a bird in that column. Columns 4 and 5, you're going to have to pay 2 eggs to get birds out into those spots. Once you've paid your cost, you slide your cube back to the first row and just leave it there to represent that you've taken that action. Now, something important to note when you're paying food for these birds is you can always exchange 2 of any kind of food to represent 1 that you don't have. So if you need rats and you've only got wheat, you can turn 2 wheats into a rat in order to pay the cost to play a bird. All right, so that's the play a bird action. Let's have a look at how you gain food. All right, so the gain food action involves once again taking one of your cubes and placing it in the first empty spot with no card in the row that is the gain food row or the forest row. You place your cube there, and in each of these squares there is an icon depicting a dice. You will take from the bird feeder the number of dice that are showing. So in this case, the first slot shows 1 dice. I would take one dice of my choice out of the bird feeder and take the matching token as food and put it in my supply. Now, if I had bird cards in play, then the next open spot might allow me to take 2 or even 3 dice. And some of these spots also have the option for you to discard a card from your hand to take an additional dice, and you will take those out and take the matching tokens depending on what you need. Now, another word about the bird feeder: if at any time when you go to collect dice out of the bird feeder, the dice in the bird feeder show exactly the same food, then you can re-roll all 5 dice and have a look at new resources to take. So even if there's only 1 dice in there, you can re-roll all 5 and hopefully get something that you want. Now, after you've taken food tokens, you then will move your cube back 1 space at a time until it gets to the very end. And if you have any birds in play that have brown powers, once you land on them, you then activate the brown power from that bird and you'll get some other bonus, whatever happens to be on the bird. And then eventually you'll end up back in this last spot, and that's the end of your turn. That is the gain food action. Alright, so the lay eggs action works exactly the same way as the gain food, but obviously in the middle row. Once again, you will place your cube on the first empty spot in the row, and the number of eggs that are shown is the number of eggs that you will take from the supply. And then you need to place those eggs onto birds that have space for them. So remember, the birds have the little symbol showing how many eggs they can hold. So if this bird holds 3 eggs, I can put up to 3 eggs on that bird. I can spread my eggs around anywhere I want on those birds when I take them. As with the gain food action, there's a way to get extra eggs. You can, in this case, on a couple of those spots, discard a food token to take an extra egg when you are taking eggs. Then also you will move your cube back, and any birds that have brown powers that are in that row will trigger as you move back towards the starting spot. And once you get to the end, that's the end of your turn, the lay eggs action. So the final action that you can take is draw bird cards, and this works on the bottom row, exactly the same as the previous 2. You will place your cube on the first empty spot and take the number of cards that are depicted there, with the option of, in some of those spots, paying eggs this time, so discarding an egg from a bird in order to take an extra card. Now, when you're taking cards, there are always 3 cards face up, which you can choose to take. Or if you don't like any of those, you can always take a random card from the top of one of the piles that are here in the tray. You can mix and match, but you only ever get to see 3 birds. So if you take one of these, it doesn't get replaced until the end of your turn after you've taken all your bird cards. And then, as with the other rows, you will move your cube back and activate any brown powers on birds that may be in that particular row. and that's the draw bird cards action. So the game, or the round, continues with, in turn order, each player placing one of these cubes and taking one of those 4 actions until all of their cubes are placed and they've completed all their actions. Then the round ends. Let's have a look at what happens at the end of the round. All right, so at the end of the round, we're going to score the round 1 goal. So one of these little tokens that will be on the score sheet, and depending on which side you're using, it'll score differently. But for example, let's use this as an example. In round 1, you're going to score points for birds in the forest or in the woodland region. So depending on which side, if we're playing on this slightly more friendly side, you will take one of your cubes, and depending on how many birds or how many of that particular goal you have achieved, you'll place your cube in one of those scoring spots. And at the end of the game, you'll score points for wherever your cube is. If you're playing on the other side, which is a little bit more cutthroat, you're going to score for first place, second place, and third place. So whoever has the most will gain the most points, and so on. Now, what will happen, of course, is that one of these cubes will stay on this board for scoring at the end of the game, which means for the next round, you're going to have 1 less action. And that happens for each round. So each round of the 4 rounds, you have 1 less action each turn. So the game sort of goes quicker until the end of the rounds. All right, so that basically is how the game runs. You'll take one of those 4 actions until you run out of cubes. End of each round, you'll score that particular goal and then move into the next round. At the end of each round, all of the bird cards that are on display get removed and a new 3 are placed out for the new round. So you've got different birds to choose from. And that's basically it. Let's have a look now at how the game finishes. So after the 4th and final round, you'll do a final scoring. Now, once again, as I mentioned right at the outset, you will score points for all of your birds that you have in play. Each of the birds has a particular score that you'll add up. Then you're going to score points for any of the bonus points, or the round end scores that you may have achieved for first, second, third, or the amounts that you've achieved for each of those you're going to score. You'll also score for any of these bonus cards that you may have achieved during the course of the game. And then also eggs. You're going to count every egg that you've still got in play, that's a point. Any birds that have food stacked up on top of, and any birds that have cards tucked underneath. Add up all those points, and whoever has the most points obviously is the winner, and that's Wingspan. In summary, players are trying to collect birds and place them in the correct habitats to earn points. Each turn you can choose from 4 actions: play a bird, gain food, lay eggs, or draw cards. Then any birds with brown powers will activate, giving you bonus actions. At the end of each round, you will score for achieving certain goals. After 4 rounds and a final scoring, the player with the most points is the winner. Yeah, Wingspan is a fantastic game. It's relatively simple once you get the hang of how the turn works and those actions work. They effectively all work the same way, so it's quite simple once you get the hang of it. But there's a bit of strategy involved in knowing which birds to collect, which goals you're going to go after, and each game will be slightly different as a result of that. But really fun. And if you like Wingspan, there's an expansion for it that's just recently been released called the European expansion. Adds more birds, this time birds from Europe. All of the ones in standard Wingspan are North American birds. This also adds a different type of bird which has blue round end actions, so things that occur at the end of the round that can give you bonuses as well as a few different round goals as well. So look out for that one as well. Definitely recommended. Check out Wingspan. Okay, thanks for watching and happy gaming.